here's what's coming up on your horizon. Well, the first Monday of September marks much more than just the changing of the seasons. Today, our focus is on work and the Labor Day holiday established to celebrate the working man and woman. We'll show you how a hard day's work helped pull our country out of the Great Depression and has left us with some true landmarks across the United States.
We started really in 1933 with the CCC, one of my favorite programs in American history.
And we'll see firsthand the difference a job can make in a person's life.
I know I can't just write them a big fat check saying, oh, here's for all the years you've helped me, but hopefully, if I can continue to keep saving money at Tinker, it's just going to go right back in their pockets and they're going to be like, wow, I've made so much money this year.
Stay with us for Oklahoma Horizon.
Oklahoma Horizon is made possible by Career Tech, a job for every Oklahoman and a workforce for every company. With additional support from the Oklahoma Department of Agriculture, Food, and Forestry.
Hello everyone, thanks for joining us here on Horizon. Well, for most of us, Labor Day is a holiday most Americans do anything but. A day off work to celebrate work itself. And while over the years, Labor Day has come to signify the traditional end of summer, Labor Day's roots, well, they go much deeper. First celebrated in New York in 1882, Labor Day's origins were no picnic in the park. While there were parades, there were also protests demanding fair wages, the end of child labor, and the right to form a union. This at a time when people often worked 12 hours, 6 days a week, in dirty, often dangerous jobs. Things like vacation, health care, and retirement pensions virtually unheard of. In the following years, the idea of a Labor Day did catch on, though, in America, but it wasn't easy. Protests led to riots, leaving people dead in the street. But in 1894, President Grover Cleveland made Labor Day a national holiday, only days after sending 12,000 soldiers to bust a railroad strike. In spite of this new holiday, it was a long time before workers began to see much change. In the middle of the Great Depression, FDR signed a law ending child labor and establishing an 8-hour, 5-day work week. America's workers continued to gain power in the 1950s when a third of the labor force was unionized and America's economy was booming. But beginning in the 1960s, factories began to close and many of the lowest skilled jobs outsourced to other countries, a trend that the CEO of Snap-on Tools believes can only be reversed with a change in America's attitude towards labor.
And the problem is, America has lost the respect for the dignity of work.
Nick Pinchuk told members of Oklahoma's Business Roundtable that many of the answers to revitalizing our economy lie in the middle.
America is a great country, and it's a great country because of the middle class and the achievement of the American dream. It has succeeded not only because of the brilliance of the few, but the efforts of the many. We are challenged today because we're in a global competition, a conflict, and our number one weapon in that conflict is career and technical education, which will upskill our workforce and allow them to differentiate them and win the competition to be the amplifiers for the ideas. Grow the middle class again. And to do that, as businessmen, as educators, as government people, we need to cooperate to shape the curriculums to be demand-driven. Call in the airstrikes so what kids are studying is exactly what's going to lead to a job. We need to change. We need to change the optical outlook on these jobs. We need to restore the respect for the dignity of work. We need to bring the American dream back to what made this great, that is prosperity and stability for a family in a great job, not necessarily a rock star job. And we need to change these consolation prizes to an American calling, a national calling. And then finally, we need to actually say that technical education is important. And like we all tell our employees, actually act like it.
Now I do have Snap-on CEO Nick Pinchuk's full speech streaming on our website, and I can tell you it's well worth a watch. Now when we return, a look at how America worked itself out of the Great Depression.
You're watching Oklahoma Horizon with Rob McClendon. Weekly insight into your changing world.
The year 1933, parts of Oklahoma ravaged by the Dust Bowl, and the country in the midst of the Great Depression. And 1 in 3 Oklahomans are on some type of government relief. But during these dire days began 2 programs that improved lives around the country and gave us buildings and landmarks we still enjoy today. Standing atop a rocky outlook over glimmering waters, Tucker Tower is an iconic landmark that can be seen from most any vantage point on Lake Murray. Limestone slabs cut by hand and stacked skyward. An ideal lookout to see the beauty of this area outside Ardmore, Oklahoma. But it's inside the tower, lining the walls, the story of how America worked its way out of the Great Depression and is best told by the Oklahoma History Center's Bob Blackburn.
Despite the boom in farm and ranch from 1898 to 1929, despite the oil boom from 1905 in Glenpool to the 1930s, Oklahoma finally descended into the black hole of the Great Depression. Bank closures, people going unemployed, people leaving, hitting the road. The Grapes of Wrath would depict one of those families leaving the land and going to California. Almost a third of all Oklahomans unemployed. And I think most importantly, people were losing hope. They were losing hope that tomorrow would be better. We've had these boom times, now we're on the slide down. We had to do something to improve the morale, as well as to put food on the table. There was no Social Security system at the time. There was no welfare department in the state of Oklahoma. You were on your own unless a family member or a church or the community would step up and say, we will help.
And it was during these desperate times, just days after taking the oath of office,
and will, to the best of my ability, preserve, protect, and defend the Constitution of the United States, so help me God.
President Roosevelt signs into law the Federal Unemployment Relief Act.
We started really in 1933 with the CCC, one of my favorite programs in American history, especially when you think about what it did for that generation and what it's done for us ever since. In the CCC, Civilian Conservation Corps was a brainchild coming out of the Franklin D. Roosevelt administration, one of the earliest of the New Deal programs, trying to provide direct relief for the unemployment and the suffering. And it was not welfare. It was let's go to work. Let's do something that helps the community. And these kids, aged 18 to 25, would go off into a military type setting, and they would get training from Army personnel. So they would drill. So they were learning discipline. They were learning how to work together. They were learning skills. And then the objective of the CCC was, as the name implied, conservation. Let's build shelter belts. Let's take care of erosion. Let's go into communities and do something together to conserve the quality of life in a community with an amphitheater or a public library or a public swimming pool or bridges that needed to be repaired so people could get from here to there. And so the CCC was one of those early programs that made such a vital difference. And then on the other side of that coin, the public side to the private side, those kids were learning lessons about life, and they had the ability to send $25 of their $30 monthly pay home to the family. That money was used generally to put food on the table, to provide the necessities of life at a time when people were wondering, where is my next meal coming from? and leading to the desperation of the Joad family in Grapes of Wrath and saying, I've got to get out of here. I've got to leave my home. I've got to leave my family, my roots, my church, and hit the road into the great unknown. That's an act of desperation. That's what we were dealing with in the early 1930s.
So essentially recognizing at the time that a public works program was better than public assistance.
Exactly, and that was the beauty of the CCCs. And then that would continue with the Works Progress Administration, the WPA, as it's better known. Now that came a little later in Oklahoma because we had a governor at the time, Alfalfa Bill Murray, who was an old-time populist, states' rights advocate. He did not want the federal strings on grants. And the WPA, the PWA, the Public Works Administration, as well as the Works Progress Administration, provided block grants to the states. And then the theory is that the state, then working through its sub-units, such as the Parks Department that was created in the 1930s, cities and counties, would then raise the money for the materials, and the PWA, WPA would provide the money for the labor, with the idea we are going to put people to work. We're going to put a shovel in their hand. We're going to get them on a project, building a city hall, a convention center, a county courthouse, a bridge, a road, whatever it was that would improve the quality of life. That's how that money would be spent. And it was not geared to efficiency so much and mechanization, but it was geared to employing people. So yes, you might have been able to hire a crew on a tractor to do something in a week, but instead they would employ 30 people and take a month. And so the mission was really a dual thing. It was to do something for the community and then to provide employment for these people who wanted to work but had no opportunity to work. Instead of taking a handout, they were given a hand up.
And with guidance from experienced craftsmen, the CCC enrollees were able to take stone that was quarried from right here in the state park and hand-hewn lumber and turn it into beautiful buildings that have withstood the test of time.
You can go into almost any community and I can recognize WPA architecture. It was a certain style. You can go into a state park like Murray State Park and go to Tucker Tower, and there are about another dozen or so buildings that date to the CCCs. You can go into Old Platte National Park, Chickasaw Recreation Heritage Area, and see the picnic pavilions. It's a very definite style, inspired by the National Park Service architecture that you still can see in Yellowstone. You can see it at the Grand Canyon. Well, the states were adopting the same. It was a very organic architecture, using natural materials, cut to look as they might have in the natural state, instead of doing the manufactured, the machine look. It's going back to nature and that organic architecture. You see it in the armories that are made out of not cut stone, but natural stone. You see it in the big log timbers used as rafters in some of these outdoor pavilions. You see the big massive piles of stone that tie the architectural style of a building to the ground. It's a particular style that's pervasive throughout Oklahoma. And many of those buildings are still being used, no matter what community you're in. And you can drive down Route 66 and find those structures, or you can go to any community. It's all around us, still making a difference.
And while it's the infrastructure we may see, these programs, these WPA programs, also were worried about preserving some cultural heritage.
They were. The WPA also wanted to make a difference in arts, in the literature area of our culture. And so they created programs such as the Oklahoma Writers Project. Well, at the time, the state got the block grant, and the money was given to the Oklahoma Historical Society of that day and time. We had just built the old historical building, that's now the Judicial Building, 21st and Lincoln, and we had the space in the building, and so unemployed journalists, unemployed writers, and others who had some writing ability were hired in the Writers Project, and they were sent out into the state, the Indian Pioneer Papers, interviews with pioneers and Indians who had made the Trail of Tears in the 1830s and 40s, were still around at the time. So those memories were collected and written in books. Today, the Indian Pioneer Papers, 116 volumes of first-person narrative from our pioneering experience, indexes to newspapers, histories of local communities, landmarks. It added to our understanding of Oklahoma, and at the same time, it employed those people who had some skills that were misapplied using a shovel on a highway, but they could sit at a typewriter and write the story of a pioneer who founded the town of Chickasha or Waurika or some other little town.
And unique artwork hanging in many of our federal buildings too come from that era.
Exactly. The Arts Project would be used. American Indians who were just learning to express themselves in a new way through their own interpretation of art were hired to do murals. There was an entire book about Indian New Deal art in Oklahoma post offices and public buildings.
Employing more than 90,000 Oklahomans. But just as importantly, what the CCC and the WPA did was prepare what's been called the greatest generation of Americans for the storm clouds of war that was soon to be on their horizon.
Well, of course, when the Japanese bombed Pearl Harbor, the nation had to come together immediately. And you saw that with the leadership of Franklin Roosevelt, the leadership in the Congress, and the nation rallied to one purpose. I believe that the 1930s lead up to that had an impact because instead of everyone out on their own, survival of the fittest, if you were hungry, too bad if you couldn't find it. The weak shall perish and the strong shall survive. Well, instead of that, you had these programs that draw us back together, using facilities that are part of these programs to build infrastructure. It was for us, not for one company, not for one person, but it was for all of us. And that sense of community was at the heart of the CCC and the WPA and the PWA in trying to work together for the common good. And with that culture there at the grassroots level, when it's time to go to war, when we have to be united, one voice speaking and determined to win, then we were ready.
And despite their legacy, FDR's New Deal programs do have their detractors. If you'd like to make up your own mind and learn more about the history of the New Deal, after the show, head to our website at okhorizon.com and look for a link we have set up to one of my favorite spots on the web. It's called Crash Course in U.S. History, where you can get pretty educated in about 15 minutes.
Horizon is at your fingertips. Join us on Facebook, Twitter, and YouTube to catch the segments you may have missed and our latest new content as it happens.
Well, a good job can certainly make as much of a difference today as it did generations ago. And nowhere is that more evident than in the life of Portia Lippincott. Teaching night students at Metro Tech's aviation campus.
And make sure you guys are careful with those heating elements.
It's easy to see instructor Portia Lippincott knows her way around a jet engine.
Are you guys labeling each part that you take out?
But it's not always been that way. Homeless at 17, Portia was living out of a refrigerator box.
I had just recently got a job at Sonic, so every day I would sleep in the box and go to Sonic, come home, sleep in the box, and I did it for 3 months. So one day at Sonic in the morning, I get a phone call. It's a lady from Norman North, and she's a counselor, and I kind of just broke down and told her everything that was going on. Well, she told me to stand by and she would call me right back. About 5 minutes later, I got her and Bridges, which is an independent homeless shelter for kids, who called saying that they wanted to meet me that day. They showed me this cute little apartment in this house that was all to myself, and they told me, this is where we want you to live. Go back to school, you could work, we'll help you get a car or whatever you need to do to go to school. And that day I moved in.
And Portia's life began to turn around. A roof over her head, and even saving some money.
I found this 93 Jeep Grand Cherokee. It had like 7 different colors going on, but I was okay with it. I paid $1,000 for it. It ran. There was some kind of sketchy things about it, like the gas. I never knew when the gas was going to run out because the meter was going. But as the time went on, my car started to act a lot different, and then it started to break down, and then one day it just didn't start at all. It was $1,907 to repair this oil pan gasket. At that time, I had no idea what any of that meant. I went on YouTube and I looked up what an oil pan gasket was, and it was on a 93 Jeep Grand Cherokee, and they were showing how you took off all these bolts, 27 of them, took down the oil pan, took off the gasket, put a new one on, put the oil pan back up, bolted it down, put some oil in, and you were good to go. And I was like, that's the most ridiculous thing ever. I could do this. 7 hours later, which nowadays it wouldn't take me 7 hours, but it did. 7 hours later, I had my car running, and it actually ran better than it did before.
Turning a crisis into an opportunity.
So I graduated high school, got my high school diploma. When I got done, they had already filled out paperwork for me to go to Moore Norman Technology Center to go and be a mechanic over there, and I did. And when I got done, I got my ASEs. So that was my whole getting out of being homeless and onto my own feet with a cool certification.
And while Portia enjoyed working on cars and trucks, life was still often a struggle.
At the time, I was actually working 3 jobs. 4 hours of sleep was okay for me, but when it became me being pregnant, I couldn't do 4 hours of sleep anymore. At that time, I was put on some government assistant programs, and they had referred me to come out to Metrotech Aviation because I already had automotive. When I enrolled, they had told me about Metrotech's foundations. They had told me about some of the welfare foundations, and I was able to get on almost every single one of them. So when I got out here, my tools, my books, my certifications, my class, everything was paid for. All I had to do was come to school and learn, and then go home and be happy.
And while school was paid for, it still takes money to live.
I mean, I still had bills that I had to pay, and I didn't have a nighttime job because I really couldn't do that with my son. While I was struggling, one of my teachers, Mr. Hensley, told me that Metrotech Foundation still had other benefits that I could benefit from. He told me that they could help me pay for gas and rent. And so I called and I told them the stuff that I was going through. I proved to them that I was having a hard time, and they helped me pay for rent, and they actually paid for my gas for a while. So I was able to go through school. I didn't have to get a second job. When I got done here, I had applied to Tinker 8 months before I graduated here. And right when I graduated, they sent me a letter saying, "We'd like you to come work for us. Your start date is October 6th. And so October 6th, I started at Tinker.
And Portia's career took off.
Other than the awesome amount of money you could make, which is awesome, you have people that are grateful. You have pilots that will come shake your hand. You have military people that respect you because you are willing to put forth that effort to help make sure that these airplanes fly and that they can support our war fighters. And I think that's the best feeling ever. If you put a lot of effort into this, you're gonna go far because people are gonna appreciate you. You may not think so when you first get out there, but they're gonna appreciate you for what you've done.
In fact, thanks to Portia's suggestions, mechanics at Tinker now use a different approach when repairing these simple electrical wires.
Well, these wires individually, there's 3 on the inlets, and they cost roughly around, with the connectors, $3,000 a piece. So, and we were doing 12 to 20 inlets a month, and we were cutting out every single one of them. What I had thought about was, why don't we just put a piece of fiberglass tape on it and then wrap it with safety wire in a way that couldn't come apart. And when it came out to it, it was $2.5 million that I had saved, and that's annually. And the fiberglass and the safety wire doesn't cost anything, so, and now it's actually in the books as a repair. You know, thank you for helping me. Now I'm helping you back to all those people that have helped fund me in the long run. I know I can't just write them a big fat check saying, oh, here's for all the years you've helped me, but hopefully, you know, if I can continue to keep saving money at Tinker, it's just gonna go right back in their pockets, and they're gonna be like, wow, I've made so much money this year.
A gratitude that translates into tax savings for all of us. Not only is Portia off of any type of governmental assistance, the changes she made in the work process at Tinker Air Force Base continue to accrue those tax savings every year.
Want to see more stories like this? All our segments are streaming on our YouTube channel at Oklahoma Horizon TV.
Well, as the new school year begins, more and more teachers are asking their students to take out their phones rather than put them away. Next time on Oklahoma Horizon, we examine the promise of the new digital classroom.
We tend to look at technology today and say, wow, look, technology, but it's really the tool of our day. If we're going to help students become full participants in the 21st century, they have to have access to those kinds of tools.
Plus, we'll look at how you can get a free education online. On Oklahoma's Show for the Heartland, Oklahoma Horizon. Well, thanks for including us as part of your day. I'm Rob McClendon. Hope to see you back here next week.
Oklahoma Horizon is made possible by the Oklahoma Department of Career and Technology Education, with additional support from the Oklahoma Department of Agriculture, Food, and Forestry.